It was a freezing November morning in Burlington, Vermont. And at 70 years old, Adelaide Holloway was standing on a cracked sidewalk with nothing left, 2 cardboard boxes, 1 suitcase held together with twine, and exactly $56.38 folded inside her coat pocket. Her own children had just thrown her out, not strangers, not enemies. Her son, her daughter, the 2 people she had spent 45 years loving, feeding, raising, sacrificing for. They called her a burden. They sold the house, her late husband had left her, and they drove away without looking back. 3 days later, that same trembling woman walked into a county auction and raised a single crumpled $5 bill to bid on a property the state had condemned as worthless. A room full of 30 real estate investors erupted in laughter. One man pointed at her and said, "Lady, you're literally buying your own grave." They were wrong about everything, because what Adelaide would discover hidden inside that collapsing house, a secret buried beneath rotting floorboards for 153 years, would astonish historians, rewrite a forgotten chapter of New England's past, and prove something the world had stopped believing in, that a woman everyone discarded as worthless was carrying something priceless inside her all along. This is the story of Adelaide Holloway and the $5 house that changed everything. Stay with me. To understand how Adelaide ended up on that sidewalk, standing in the freezing wind, watching her own life disappear behind a closing door, we have to go back, just 6 months back, to a quieter morning, a warmer kitchen, a different woman. Adelaide had lived on Maple Crest Lane for 42 years. It was a modest house, 2 stories, white paint that needed redoing, a wraparound porch where her husband Edmund used to drink black coffee at 5 in the morning, a blue front door that she had painted herself twice. Once in 1989, when the kids were small, once in 2017, when Edmund first got sick. Edmund Holloway had been a watchmaker, a real one, the kind who could open the back of a thing the size of a quarter and rebuild the universe inside it. He worked from a small bench in the basement. He listened to old radio shows while he worked. He hummed when he was happy. For 45 years, he hummed in that basement. And then in May of 2019, the humming stopped. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from the day they got the news. 4 months from a Tuesday afternoon at the doctor's office to a Friday morning at the funeral home. That was all the time the universe gave him. Adelaide was 66 the day she buried him. She came home from the cemetery, hung up her black coat, walked into the kitchen, and realized there would be no humming in the basement tonight. There would be no humming ever again. She didn't cry that first night. She made tea, she watched the steam rise, she listened to the house creak, and she understood in the quiet that something inside her had to either grow or die. She decided to grow. For 4 years, she grew. She tended Edmund's hydrangeas, big, soft blue blooms along the back fence that he had planted the spring before he got sick. She taught knitting to the neighborhood kids on Thursday afternoons. She volunteered at the elementary school library where she had worked for 31 years before retirement. She drank her coffee on the porch every morning. Sometimes she talked to Edmund out loud. Sometimes he answered, or she imagined he did, which is the same thing, really. She was alone, but she was not lonely. There is a difference. Adelaide had learned the difference. Then came May of 2023. Then came her children. Roland Holloway was 45 years old, a corporate accountant in Hartford, Connecticut, married once, divorced once, no children of his own. He wore expensive shoes and a wristwatch that cost more than the car Edmund had driven for 20 years. He had not called his mother on her birthday in 3 years. Vivian Holloway Briggs was 42, retail manager at a luxury department store in Boston, married to a real estate broker named Trent, who Adelaide had met exactly twice, 2 children, both teenagers. Adelaide had not been invited to either of their last 3 birthday parties. These were the two children she had raised. These were the two adults who showed up at her door on a Saturday afternoon in May, smiling, carrying a bottle of red wine, saying they wanted to talk. Adelaide should have known then. Looking back, she would always wonder, why didn't I see it? But she didn't, because they were her children, because she had loved them since the moment each of them came screaming into the world, because love makes you blind in the most specific, most foolish ways. They sat at her kitchen table. Roland did the talking. Mom, we've been worried about you. You're alone in this house. Edmund's been gone 4 years now. We just want to make sure you're protected. He used that word, protected. Vivienne nodded. She didn't say much. She kept fiddling with the napkin in her lap. Roland slid a folder across the table. Inside were papers, official looking, notarized, stamped. It's a transfer of deed, Mom. You sign the house over to us. We hold it in our names. If anything happens to you, God forbid, there's no probate, no legal fees, no inheritance tax. It just transfers cleanly. We've talked to a lawyer. It's the smart thing to do. Adelaide looked at the papers. She looked at her son's face. She looked at her daughter, who would not meet her eyes. She felt for one strange second, something cold passed through her chest, like a draft from a window left open in winter. But she ignored it because they were her children. She signed. 6 months passed. Adelaide noticed small things. The Christmas card she sent never got a reply. The phone call she made on Roland's birthday went to voicemail. The check she sent Vivienne's daughter for high school graduation came back uncashed, then disappeared entirely. She told herself they were busy. She told herself this was just how adult children were now, distant, tired, caught up in their own lives. She told herself a lot of things. Then came the 15th of November, 2023, a Wednesday. Adelaide was making oatmeal when the doorbell rang at 9:30 in the morning. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door and the world ended. Roland was there, Vivienne was there, and behind them stood a third person, a woman in a navy blazer, a clipboard, a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mom, this is Patricia Donnelly. She's from Cedar Brook Realty. Adelaide did not move. Can we come in? She let him in. She sat down at the kitchen table where she had signed the papers in May. The oatmeal was still on the stove. It started to burn. Nobody got up to turn off the heat. Roland cleared his throat. Mom, we need to talk about something difficult. Vivienne stared at her hands. The house has been on the market for 3 weeks. We have a buyer. The offer came in last night, $512,000 cash. Closing is in 30 days. Adelaide blinked once, twice, 3 times. She heard the words. She understood the words. But her brain refused to assemble them into meaning. You sold my house. It's not your house, Mom. That was Vivienne. The first words she had spoken. You signed it over to us. It's been ours since May. Adelaide turned to look at her daughter, the little girl she had carried home from the hospital in a yellow blanket, the little girl whose scraped knees she had bandaged, whose first heartbreak she had held through a long November night, whose wedding dress she had altered by hand in this very kitchen 3 weeks before the wedding. That little girl looked back at her with a stranger's face. Roland kept talking. The realtor handed her a brochure. Mom, listen, we've already booked you a room at Pine Meadow Assisted Living. It's in Street Albans, very affordable, $3,200 a month. Adelaide laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the sound a person makes when their body has not yet decided whether to cry or scream. I get $1,200 a month, Roland. From Social Security, that is all the money I have in the world. Roland did not look up. We'll figure something out, Mom. How? He did not answer because there was no answer, because there had never been an answer, because the figuring out was the part they had never planned to do. The brochure showed a small room with a single bed, a shared bathroom, a view of a parking lot. Adelaide set it down on the table. She looked at her 2 children, and for the first time in 70 years, she heard her own voice come out hard. When did I become a problem to be solved? Silence. She turned to Vivienne. When Vivienne's lip trembled, but Roland answered, Mom, you're being dramatic. We are doing what's best for everyone. For everyone, yes, for everyone. She said it again, slower, like she was trying to taste the lie. Roland's jaw tightened. You're becoming a burden, Mom. Okay? Is that what you want to hear? The calls about the furnace. The worry about you being alone out here. We have our own lives. We have our own responsibilities. We cannot keep doing this. There it was. The word, Borden. It hung in the kitchen like the smell of the oatmeal burning on the stove. A word a child uses about a mother. A word for the woman who had labored 31 hours to bring him into the world. A word for the woman who had cleaned his vomit off the floor at 3 a.m. when he was 9. A word for the woman who had taken a second job at the public library so he could go to summer camp the year his father's shop was struggling. Borden. Adelaide stood up, slowly, carefully, because her knees were not what they used to be. She walked to the stove. She turned off the burner. She moved the pot of burnt oatmeal to a cool eye. Then she walked out of the kitchen, down the hall, up the stairs, into her bedroom. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, and she did not cry. She would not give them that. Not yet. That night, after Roland and Vivienne and the realtor had left, after the house had gone quiet again, Adelaide went down to the basement. Edmund's basement, his workbench was still there. His tools were still there. His old leather chair was still there in the corner where he used to sit and read. She sat down in the chair. She let herself cry then, quiet, slow, ugly crying, the kind that comes from a place so deep it doesn't make sound. She cried for 45 minutes. Then she stood up. She wiped her face on the sleeve of her cardigan, and she went to the bookshelf next to Edmund's bench. On the shelf was his favorite book, The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway. He had read it 19 times in his life. He had told her this once with the seriousness of a man confessing a sin. She took the book down, and out of the back, tucked between the last page and the cover, an envelope fell into her lap. She picked it up. Her name was on the front. In Edmund's handwriting, Addie. Her hands began to shake. She opened it. The letter was dated the 12th of March, 2019, 6 weeks before he died. Addie of my heart, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and something has happened, something hard, something you did not expect. I'm sorry I am not there. I would give anything to be there. But listen to me, my love. I know you. I have known you since you were 19 years old, and you laughed too loud at my terrible joke at the church picnic, and I decided right then I was going to marry you. You think you are soft. You are not soft. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. Your hands fixed Roland's bicycle when he was 8. Your hands knitted Vivienne's first winter coat. Your hands planted every flower in that garden. Your hands held mine through every hard thing that ever happened to us. Your hands are stronger than you know, Addie. Whatever has happened, whatever they have done, whatever you have lost your hands are still your hands. Use them. I love you. I love you. I love you. Edmund. She read it 3 times. Then 4. Then she pressed the paper to her face and breathed in, as if some trace of him might still be in the ink. When she finally lowered the letter, her eyes were dry. She looked at her hands, wrinkled, spotted with age. 2 of the knuckles were swollen from arthritis. But these were the hands that had built a life. These were the hands that had loved a man for 45 years. These were her hands, and Edmund had been right. They were still hers. She folded the letter. She put it in the inside pocket of her cardigan, close to her heart. Then she went upstairs and she began to pack. She had 2 weeks. That was what Roland had said, 2 weeks to be out. Adelaide spent those 2 weeks the way a soldier prepares for a war. She cannot win but will not surrender. She packed only what she could carry, a few clothes, Edmund's watch, a photograph of the two of them at the cabin in Stowe, summer of 1981, both of them laughing at something the camera didn't catch, her mother's Bible, a small leather pouch with their wedding rings inside. Everything else stayed. The china that had been her grandmother's, the quilt she had hand-stitched during the long winter of 1992, the 42 years of accumulated life, it all stayed because she could not carry it. And because in some private way, she did not yet have words for. She did not want to. Whatever life came next, she wanted to meet it with empty hands. The 15th of November, 2023, 10:30 in the morning. A moving truck arrived, not for her, for the buyer, to clear the house. Adelaide was on the porch. She had her 2 cardboard boxes, her suitcase with the twine handle, her coat, her hat, her cardigan with the letter in the pocket. The movers offered half-heartedly to help her carry her things to the sidewalk. She refused. She walked her own things down to the curb, one trip at a time, slowly, carefully. Roland and Vivienne were not there. They had sent a text message that morning. Hope you understand, this is what's best, Mom. We'll be in touch. Adelaide had not responded. She sat down on her suitcase. The wind was sharp. It came down the street and went up under her coat and found every old place in her bones. A neighbor she had known for 30 years drove past in her car, saw Adelaide on the sidewalk, looked away, kept driving. Adelaide watched her go. And she understood something then, and something she had not understood before. When you become a problem, you stop being a person to everyone, not just to your children, to the whole world. You become invisible, like a piece of furniture that someone has finally decided to throw out. She did not cry. She did not have time to cry because she had $56.38 and she had to figure out where she was going to sleep tonight. She sat on her suitcase for an hour. The cold worked its way through her coat. Her fingers went numb. Her nose ran. A school bus passed, then a delivery truck, then a man on a bicycle who did not look at her. She was alone on a sidewalk in front of the house where she had given birth to 2 children, where she had buried a husband, where she had spent her entire adult life, and not one person stopped. Then at 11:45, the wind blew a newspaper out of a trash can across the street. It tumbled down the road, and it came to rest exactly at Adelaide's feet. She would think about that later, the way it stopped, the way it landed face up, the way her eye went immediately to a small block of text in the bottom right corner of the back page. Public auction today, condemned properties, minimum bid $1, county administration building, 2 p.m. She read it 3 times. Her heart began to do something strange in her chest. Not pounding, not racing, considering. She looked at her hands. She heard Edmund's voice. Your hands are still your hands. Use them. She stood up. She picked up her suitcase. She picked up her 2 cardboard boxes, and she walked toward the county building. She did not know exactly what she was going to do, but for the first time in 6 months, she was not waiting for someone else to decide her life. The county administration building was 8 blocks away. For a 70-year-old woman carrying 2 boxes and a suitcase with a broken handle, 8 blocks is a long way. She stopped 4 times to rest. Once, an elderly man at a bus stop offered to help her carry her things. She thanked him and refused. She did not have the strength to explain her situation to a stranger. She had the strength to walk. That was all. She arrived at the building at 1:45. The auction was being held in the basement, a flat fluorescent room with metal folding chairs. About 30 people were already there. All men, all in business casual, pressed khakis, leather shoes, the smug, relaxed posture of people who came to auctions like this the way some people come to garage sales. Real estate investors. Adelaide sat in the back row. A man in his 40s glanced at her, took in the cardboard boxes, the broken suitcase, the thin coat, the white hair. He smirked, and then he turned back around. She had become invisible again. Good, that was good. Invisible was useful. The auctioneer was a heavy-set man named Donald Pierce. He had a microphone clipped to his collar. He read each property description fast, with the bored cadence of a man who had done this 200 times before. The first lots went quickly. A commercial space in downtown, $45,000. A house with foundation damage, $12,000. A water damaged duplex, $38,000. The investors leaned forward, made small notes on their phones, bid against each other with sharp practice motions of their fingers. Adelaide watched. She listened, she learned. Bid in dollar increments. Hold up your hand or call out a number, pay immediately, cash, money order, or cashier's check. No exceptions. She had $51.38 left after a bottle of water from a vending machine. She breathed slowly. She waited. 90 minutes in, they had worked through 21 properties. Pierce shuffled his papers. All right, folks, second to last. This one's a real winner. His voice was thick with sarcasm. Property number 22, end of Timber Ridge Road, approximately 12 miles outside city limits, single-family dwelling, 1,200 square feet, built circa 1871. A few low laughs scattered around the room. Property has been abandoned for approximately 15 years. No electricity, no running water, no functional septic system, significant roof damage, broken windows, foundation issues, extensive mold. County inspector has condemned the structure as uninhabitable and recommended demolition. Bigger laughs now. Access is via an unpaved forestry road, impassable in winter, no nearby neighbors. Pierce paused, looked up, a small grin. And just to sweeten the deal, folks, there is an active family of raccoons living in what used to be the kitchen. The room erupted. Men slapped their thighs. One man wiped his eyes. So who will start the bidding at $1 for this prime piece of real estate? Silence. Pierce smiled. Come on, gentlemen, $1. You can use the lot to bury your problems. More laughter. Adelaide stood up. She did it slowly, because her knees. But she stood, and every head in the room turned. She held up a $5 bill. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was not. $5. There was a moment of pure silence. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then the laughter came, not polite, chuckling, roaring laughter, whooping. One man actually slapped his hand on the chair in front of him. Look at that. Grandma wants in. Lady, do you know what you're bidding on? You're literally buying your own grave. That place is a death trap, ma'am. You'll be dead in a week. It's a raccoon condo, lady. A raccoon condo. Adelaide stood very still. She kept her hand up. She did not lower her eyes. She did not lower the bill. Pierce held up a hand for quiet. His amusement had faded. He looked tired now. And something else, something that almost looked like pity. Ma'am, I need to make sure you understand what you're bidding on. This property is condemned. It is not habitable. It has no utilities. It is 12 miles from town on a road that is not maintained. Are you sure? I'm sure. $5 is your bid. Yes. Anyone want to bid against the lady? $6? Pierce looked around the room. The men were still laughing. None of them raised a hand. Of course they didn't. Why would they spend even one more dollar on a property that would cost $60,000 to make livable? All right then, going once at $5, he paused. Going twice, he paused again. Longer this time. He was almost begging someone to stop her. No one did. Sold. Property number 22 to the lady in the back for $5. The room applauded, some of it sarcastic, some of it real, the way you applaud a small dog that has done something brave and stupid. Adelaide walked to the front of the room. She walked slowly past the rows of laughing men. She placed her $5 bill on the table. She did not look at him. She filled out the paperwork. Her hand shook. Pierce had to point to where she needed to sign 3 times. A younger investor approached her as she was finishing. Look, ma'am, I don't know what's going on with you, but that place will kill you. You hear me? You can't live there. Adelaide did not look up. Thank you. I'm being serious. Sueni. He stared at her for another moment. Then he walked away, shaking his head. Pierce handed her a manila envelope. The deed, survey map, property documents, directions. She took it and, ma'am, she looked at him. Good luck. She nodded. She walked out of the room with her envelope, her 2 cardboard boxes, and her broken suitcase. Behind her, the laughter slowly settled into the murmur of men returning to their phones. It was almost 4 in the afternoon when Adelaide stepped out of the county building. The sun was setting, the wind had picked up, the temperature was dropping fast. She had no car, no phone, no plan. She had a deed in her hand for a property she had never seen. She stood on the steps of the building, her cardboard boxes at her feet, and she thought very simply. Now, a man came out of the building behind her. He was in his early 70s, stooped slightly, white hair, neatly combed back, a wool coat, a face that had spent a lot of time outdoors. He had been in the auction. Adelaide had seen him in the back, but he had not bid on anything. He stopped next to her on the steps. Ma'am, she turned. I was in there. With you? Yes. He hesitated. I overheard the auctioneer say the address, Timber Ridge Road. Yes, I live out that way, about 4 miles past that property. She looked at him. He looked back. He did not look like a man who was going to laugh at her. You got a way out there? No. He nodded once, slowly, like a man making a decision he had not planned to make. Truck's around the corner. You want to ride? It was not a question. It was not even an offer, really. It was the simple statement of a thing that needed to happen. Adelaide's eyes filled for the first time all day. She did not let the tears fall. She nodded. He picked up one of her cardboard boxes. Silas Pemberton, Adelaide Holloway. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Holloway. Likewise, they walked to his truck in silence. The drive took 35 minutes. For the first 10, neither of them spoke. Silas drove with both hands on the wheel. His radio was off. The cab of his truck smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and coffee. Eventually, around the edge of town, he cleared his throat. You from Burlington, Mrs. Holloway? Yes. Lived here long? 42 years. Husband? He passed 4 years ago. Sorry to hear that. Thank you. Silence again. Then, you got family? Adelaide looked out the window. The trees were taller out here, pines, the kind that made a wall against the road. I had 2 children. Silas glanced at her. He did not ask. She did not explain. He just nodded and drove. The forestry road was barely a road. 2 tire tracks through dense pine forest. Branches scraped the sides of the truck. The truck rocked over rocks and frozen ruts. They drove for almost a mile. Then the trees opened up, and there it was. Even in the headlights, even in the dim purple light of a November dusk, Adelaide could see the shape of what she had bought. A small structure, 1.5 stories, stone foundation, heavy timber frame. the kind of house people built in the 1870s when they expected it to last forever. It had not lasted. The roof sagged in the middle. There was a hole near the chimney, maybe 3 feet wide. Every window was broken, just empty frames with shards of glass clinging to rotted wood. The front door hung open on one hinge. Vines grew up the side of the building. A small pine tree was growing right through the collapsed half of the porch. The whole house leaned slightly to the left, as if the forest were quietly, patiently pulling it back down into the earth. Silas let out a long, low whistle. "Mom?" "Yes." "This is what you bought?" "Yes." He turned off the engine. The silence of the forest came in. It was the kind of silence that has texture. Wind in pines, a branch creaking, some small animal moving in the underbrush. Mrs. Holloway, "Yes, you cannot sleep in that house tonight. I have to. It's going to drop below freezing in an hour. I know you will die out here. I won't." He looked at her, a long, careful look. He had a face that was used to reading weather and ground and animals and perhaps people. He read her now, and he saw something. He saw it clearly. He sighed. "All right." He got out of the truck. He carried her boxes to the front door for her. He used a crowbar from the back of the truck to force the swollen door open. He went back to the truck, came back with a battery-powered camping lantern, a wool blanket, a blue tarp, a length of rope. For the next 45 minutes, they worked together, almost without speaking. They cleared a small patch of floor in the front room. Stones, branches, old leaves, the unmistakable evidence of 15 years of small animals. They climbed up onto a chair that Silas pulled from his truck. He tossed the tarp over the hole in the roof and tied it down to the exposed beams with rope. It was not waterproof. It was not warm, but it was less of a hole. Somewhere in the kitchen area, something chittered angrily at him. The raccoons watching. They'll move on once they realize you're staying. I won't hurt them. I figured when they were done, Silas stood in the doorway. He looked at her, then at the house, then at her again. "Mrs. Holloway, yes, there's a general store about 5 miles back the way we came, Marchetti's, run by a woman named Odette. She opens at 6. All right, she's a good woman. Tell her I sent you. Thank you." He hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket. He held out a $20 bill. She looked at it. She did not take it. "Mrs. Holloway, I cannot accept that, Mr. Pemberton. It's not charity." "Then, what is it?" He thought for a moment. "Call it a housewarming gift from a neighbor." She looked at his face. There was no pity in it, just a tired, quiet kindness. She took the bill. "Thank you. I come this way 3-4 times a week to check on my place. I'll stop by." "You don't have to." "I know." He nodded once. Then he walked back to his truck. He stopped at the door, turned back. "Mrs. Holloway, yes, whatever you're running from." He paused. "It's not following you out here." She did not answer. He got in his truck. He drove away, and Adelaide Holloway stood alone in the doorway of a condemned house in the deep Vermont woods, watching his taillights disappear through the trees. The temperature was dropping fast. The wind was rising in the pines above her, and somewhere in the kitchen, the raccoons were watching her. She stepped inside. She closed the broken door behind her as best she could. She picked up the lantern. She turned it on, and in the small yellow circle of light, standing in the wreckage of a house no one had wanted, Adelaide Holloway whispered to no one and to everyone, "This is my home now." She set down the lantern. She unfolded the wool blanket. She lay down on the floor, and in the darkness above her, through the gap where the tarp did not quite cover the hole in the roof, a single star was visible. She watched it. For a long time, she did not cry. She did not sleep. She just watched the star. And somewhere deep in her chest, in a place she had thought was empty, something began to grow. Adelaide woke at 5:14 in the morning. She knew the time because Edmund's old watch was on her wrist and the second hand was still moving. 45 years of marriage, 45 years of his quiet ticking. And now, on her wrist, in a ruined house in the Vermont woods, the ticking continued. The watch had outlasted him. The watch had outlasted everything. She sat up slowly. Every joint in her body screamed. Her back, her hips, her left knee, the shoulder she had slept on. Her breath made a small white cloud in the air. The house was so cold she could feel the cold on her teeth. She looked up through the gap above the tarp. The sky was the color of slate. Not yet morning, not still night, the in-between. She thought about Edmund, about how he used to wake at 5:15. Every day of their married life, he would slip out of bed, make coffee, sit on the porch in his slippers, watch the sun come up. He said the early hour was the only hour of the day that belonged entirely to him. She had never understood that. Until now, she made herself stand up. She did it in stages. First, she rolled onto her side. Then, she pushed up onto one elbow. Then, she got onto her hands and knees. Then, she used the wall to pull herself to her feet. It took almost 3 minutes. A thought came to her, sharp and practical. If I fall and break something out here, no one will find me until Silas comes back. And he said 3 or 4 times a week. So do not fall. That became her first rule. Rule 1 of her new life, do not fall. The lantern was almost dead. She turned it off to save what was left of the battery. She used the gray dawn coming through the windows to see. The house looked even worse in the morning. In the dark last night, it had been a shape, a shadow, a general impression of ruin. Now she could see. The floor was covered in 15 years of accumulated debris, pine needles, branches, the hard, small pellets of mouse droppings, a bird's nest, fallen and broken in the corner, the black furred shape of mold along the bottom of every wall. The smell was something she had not allowed herself to register the night before. Wetwood, rot, animals, something dead somewhere that she could not see. She walked carefully around the perimeter of the room. The floorboards groaned under her. In 2 places, they had rotted through. She could see down into the dark crawl space beneath the house. The kitchen was worse. The old wood-burning stove was so corroded it looked like it would crumble if she touched it. The cabinets had no doors. Anything that had been in them was gone, decades gone. On top of the highest cabinet, 4 small dark eyes watched her. The mother raccoon and 3 babies. The mother chittered loud, a warning. Adelaide stopped walking. She raised both hands, palms out, the way you would to a dog you did not know. Easy. The raccoon chittered again, louder. Easy, Mama, I'm not going to hurt you. She backed away slowly out of the kitchen, into the front room. She sat down on her suitcase. Her legs were shaking. A small voice rose up inside her, quiet and surprised. I am 70 years old. I just had a standoff with a raccoon. And despite everything, despite the cold and the smell and the absolute disaster of her situation, she laughed. It was a small laugh, a short, hoarse, surprised little laugh. It came out of her like a cough, but it was a laugh. And in the silence of that ruined house, in the gray light of dawn, the sound of her own laughter shocked her. She had not laughed since the day before Roland and Vivian told her she was a burden. She had forgotten what her own laugh sounded like. It sounded, surprisingly, like Edmund's. She drank the last of the water Silas had given her. She ate the last half of a granola bar she had saved from her cardboard box. Then she put on her coat, her hat, her gloves, and she stepped outside Sunrise, the forest was on fire. Not real fire, light. The first light of morning was hitting the tops of the pines, and they were glowing orange against a pale gold sky. Frost everywhere, every blade of dead grass, every fallen pine needle, every cobweb stretched between branches, all of it crusted in tiny white crystals. It was beautiful. It was so beautiful that Adelaide stopped breathing for a moment. For 4 years, since Edmund died, she had lived in Burlington, a nice town, a safe town, but she had not seen anything like this. She had not stood inside a morning like this. I have lived 70 years and I have never woken up inside a forest. What else have I missed? She walked 5 miles, Silas had said. She did not have a watch that told distance. She only had Edmund's watch that told time. So she started walking at 6:12. The forestry road went on forever. Pine, 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 pine. A bird she did not recognize crossed in front of her. A small brown animal vanished into the undergrowth. Her breath made clouds. Her nose ran. Her feet, in her old brown loafers, were cold by mile 2. She kept walking. She had no choice. Because she could not go back. Because there was nowhere to go back to. So forward. Only forward. She reached the main road at 7:43. Marchetti's General Store was another half-mile down the highway. It was a small wooden building with a green tin roof, a single gas pump out front, a hand-painted sign hanging in the window, open. She pushed open the door. A bell jingled above her. The store was warm. So warm it felt like walking into a memory of warmth. The kind of warmth you forget exists when you have spent a night in a house that has no heat. Adelaide stood in the doorway for a moment, just breathing, just feeling the heat on her face. Behind the counter was a woman, mid-60s, olive skin, dark hair streaked with silver, pinned up in a loose knot, a flour-dusted apron over a flannel shirt, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up, she took Adelaide in, the whole picture, the thin coat, the exhausted face, the hands red with cold. She did not say, "Can I help you?" She said, "Sit down, Hon, right there by the heater." She pointed to a wooden chair next to a small electric heater glowing orange in the corner. Adelaide sat. The woman walked out from behind the counter. She poured a mug of coffee from a battered metal pot. She added cream without asking. She brought it to Adelaide and pressed it into her hands. "Drink that." Slow, Adelaide drank. The coffee was strong and hot, and the cream was real cream from a glass bottle, and it was the best thing she had tasted in a year. The woman watched her drink. She said nothing. She waited. After the mug was half gone, Adelaide finally spoke. "Silas Pemberton said to tell you he sent me." The woman's face changed, a small, almost invisible softening at the eyes. "You're the one who bought the old place on Timber Ridge." Adelaide nodded. "Word travels fast, Hon." Burlington Free Press had a little blurb about the auction this morning. "Unidentified elderly woman buys condemned Timber Ridge property for $5. That you?" "That's me." The woman extended a hand. "Odette Marchetti." Adelaide Holloway. Adelaide. She said the name slowly, like she was testing the weight of it. That's a good name. My grandmother's name was Adelaide. Strong woman, buried 3 husbands, outlived them all. Adelaide almost smiled. Odette did not smile back. She studied her face. "You sleep out there last night?" "Yes." "In November?" "Yes." "Hon." Adelaide waited. "Honorable, look at me." Adelaide looked. "You cannot do that again. Not without proper heat, not at your age. You will die out there. Do you hear me?" Adelaide nodded. "I hear you." "All right." Odette walked back behind the counter. She started moving with the brisk economy of a woman who had decided something. "How much money you got on you?" $48 and some change. Odette nodded once. "All right, Here's what we're doing. I'm going to put together a bag of supplies: rice, beans, salt, a box of matches, some hard candy for energy, a package of dried apples, some jerky, a jug of water purification tablets, and a wool blanket from my back room, old one, used to be mine. Mrs. Marchetti, Odette, I can't pay for all that. I'm charging you $20. That's not enough. It's plenty. Odette, Adelaide, they looked at each other across the counter, two old women, one on each side, the morning sun coming through the window. Adelaide said, "Why are you doing this?" Odette took a long breath. She picked up a can of beans, set it down, picked it up again. She said, "In 1987, my husband took everything we had and ran off with a bookkeeper from Montpelier. I had 2 kids and a leaky roof and no money. A woman I had never met before, a woman who ran the diner where I scrubbed floors. She paid my rent for 3 months. She never told a soul. I asked her once why she did it. You know what she said? What? She said, because someday it'll be your turn." Odette put the can of beans in a paper bag. "This is my turn." Adelaide carried the bag and the blanket, both heavy. She would have to walk the 5 miles back. At the door, Odette stopped her. "Adelaide, yes, I need a cleaner. 3 mornings a week, 5 to 8, $15 an hour." Adelaide stared at her. "I have not held a paying job in 23 years. You used to be a librarian. How did you know that?" "Silas called me at 6 this morning. After he saw you home." Adelaide's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. "You can sweep, you can stock shelves, you can wipe down a counter." "Yes. Then you can do this job Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Start tomorrow. All right? And one more thing." "Yes. Bring a thermos. I'll send you home with hot soup at the end of every shift. That's part of the deal." "Odette?" "That's part of the deal, Adelaide. Don't fight me on it." Adelaide nodded. She could not speak. She walked out into the November sunshine with a bag of food and a blanket and a job. And she thought, 18 hours ago, my children left me on a sidewalk. 18 hours ago, a room of 30 men laughed at me. And now a stranger I have never met before told me, this is my turn. She did not know yet, but she had just met 2 of the 3 people who would save her life. The walk back was easier, not because the road was shorter, but because she was no longer walking toward nothing. She was walking toward her house. It was a ruin, a wreck, a condemned shack with raccoons in the kitchen. But it was hers. And in a life where everything else had been taken from her, that word, hers, that word was a kind of fire she could carry in her chest. She walked the 5 miles back to Timber Ridge in 2 hours and 40 minutes. When she got to the house, she put down her bag. She did not rest. She started working. She used a pine branch as a broom. She swept for 4 hours. She swept 15 years of debris out of the front room of her house: pine needles, leaves, acorns, mouse droppings, pieces of broken plaster, a dead bird, brittle and weightless, that she carried outside on a piece of cardboard and laid gently at the base of a tree. She swept until her hands bled through her gloves. Her back screamed. Her shoulders ached so badly she could not lift her arms above her head. She kept sweeping because if she stopped, she might not start again. So she did not stop. She did not stop until the front room had a clear patch of floor, 12 feet by 12 feet. Old pine, scarred, stained, but solid. Solid wood, old wood, the kind of wood you cannot buy anymore. She sat down on her clear patch of floor. She drank water. She ate 3 pieces of dried apple from Odette's bag. She looked at her clean patch of floor. 12 feet by 12 feet. This is the first thing I have made with my own hands in 4 years. She put her hand over the pocket where Edmund's letter was. She felt the paper through the wool of her cardigan. She said out loud to the empty house, "I am using them." The house did not answer, but somewhere outside, a bird called. She took that as a yes. The first week was a war. Every day she swept. Every day she carried water from the creek 200 yards down the slope. Every day she boiled it on the wood stove. She slowly, painfully brought back to life. The stove smoked. She nearly suffocated the first time she lit it. She figured out through trial and error and a memory of something Edmund had once said that she had to clean out the chimney first. She climbed up on the roof, a 70-year-old woman, on the roof of a condemned house in the Vermont woods with a long stick. She poked the stick down the chimney. Birds' nests came out, 3 of them, old, long abandoned, a small avalanche of pine needles and twigs and what looked like part of a squirrel skull. When she came back down, she lit the stove again. It worked. Heat, real heat in her house. She cried a little when she felt the first warmth on her hands. She did not let herself cry for long. She had too much to do. She worked at Odette's 3 mornings a week. The walk in the dark before dawn was the worst part. Silas had given her a battery-powered headlamp. Hunters use these. Keep your hands free. She wore it across her hat. She walked through the black woods with a small bouncing circle of light in front of her. The first morning, every sound made her heart stop. Branches cracking, owls, the wind moving the pines. By the second week, she had learned the sounds. By the third week, she barely noticed them. She had become, she realized, a person who walked through the woods alone in the dark. She had no idea she could be that person. She had spent 70 years not knowing. The work at Odette's was simple. She mopped the floors, wiped down the counters, restocked the canned goods on the shelves, cleaned the bathroom, refilled the coffee pot. Odette never watched her. She trusted her. That trust was the thing Adelaide had not realized she was starving for. At 8, when her shift ended, Odette would hand her a thermos, hot soup, sometimes stew, once a thick clam chowder that Adelaide thought about for the next 3 days. $45 a week, paid in cash on Friday mornings, plus the thermos. It was not enough to live on, but it was enough to keep living. Silas came on Tuesdays. He drove his old pickup down the forestry road. He always brought something. He never called it a gift. A small kerosene lamp, had 2, don't need both. A wool sweater, belonged to my late wife, just sitting in a drawer. A bag of seasoned firewood, was clearing a section near my place anyway. A small camping stove, found this in the shed, probably doesn't work. It worked. She knew what he was doing. She did not call him on it. He did not call himself on it. They sat on what was left of her front porch on 2 upturned milk crates, and they drank coffee from tin mugs, and they did not say much. He had been a high school science teacher for 36 years. He had a daughter in Portland, Oregon, who called him once a month. His wife, Eleanor, had died of a stroke in 2014. He knew about plants, about birds, about weather. He looked at her woven branch and clay window covers one afternoon and just shook his head. Mrs. Holloway, Adelaide, where did you learn this? I didn't. You didn't? No. You just figured it out. There was no one to ask. He laughed, a small, dry, surprised laugh. Well, he looked at the windows again. It's holding, yes, looks like it'll hold all winter. I hope so. He shook his head. Adelaide Holloway, yes, you are a strange woman. She did not know how to take that, but she saw in his face that he meant it as a compliment. The first time she saw her own arms in a mirror, It was 3 weeks in. Odette had a small mirror in the back room of the store. Adelaide was washing her hands at the sink. She glanced up. She did not recognize the woman in the glass. The face was hers, older, thinner, more lined. Her hair, which she usually kept neat, was wild, pulled back into a loose knot with a piece of twine. But it was her arms that stopped her. She had rolled up her sleeves to wash her hands. And her forearms. Her forearms had muscles. Adelaide Holloway, 70 years old, retired school librarian, widow, had muscles in her arms. She stared at them for a long time. She moved her hand. The muscle flexed. I have a body. I have not had a body in 20 years. I have had a thing I lived in. I have had a vessel I dragged from room to room. But this is a body. She made a fist. She watched her forearm move. She thought, I am still here. The first crack came in early December, 3 weeks after her 70th birthday, which had passed in the woods without a card, without a phone call, without anyone in the world saying her name. She did not let herself think about it. She thought about firewood. She thought about the patch on the roof. She thought about the next thing. Then, one Wednesday morning, she came back to the house after her shift at Odette's. There was a car parked at the end of her driveway, a black BMW, idling. Adelaide stopped walking. Her heart did something it had not done in weeks. It dropped because she knew the car. She had been a passenger in that car twice to two of Vivian's daughter's birthday parties. It was Roland's car. She walked the last 50 yards slowly. Roland was leaning against the driver's side door in a wool coat, polished leather shoes that were already ruined by the mud of the forestry road. He was on his phone. He looked irritated. When he saw her, he ended the call. He looked at her. He looked at the house behind her. His face moved through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, disgust, something almost like fear. Mom, she did not stop walking. She walked past him, toward the house. Mom, stop. We need to talk. She stopped, not because he told her to, but because she had reached the porch and she wanted to set down the thermos she was carrying. She set it down carefully on a milk crate. Then she turned around. How did you find me? That doesn't matter. It does to me. He looked away. A cousin saw the auction notice in the paper. He recognized the name Adelaide Holloway, $5 bid. The whole town was talking about it. All right, Mom. She waited. This is insane. What is this? He gestured at the house, the tarp, the woven window, the pine bough roof patch. It is my house. It is a hovel. It is my house. Mom, listen to me. You cannot live like this. You cannot be 60 miles deep in the woods, sleeping in a literal shack in your 70s. People are going to find out about me, about my work, about the family. Do you understand how this is going to look? She blinked slowly. Once she said, how it is going to look. Yes, for you, Mom, for all of us. She felt something rise up inside her, a heat, a clean, hot anger. She did not show it. She kept her voice flat. You came out here because of how it looks for you. I came out here because I am worried about you. You came out here because the neighbors are talking. He set his jaw. I came with paperwork. We are going to fix this. There is a process. We can have you declared unable to make sound decisions. It is called conservatorship. I have already spoken to an attorney. With the doctor's statement and your living situation and a brief mental evaluation, we can have you safely placed in a proper facility within a month. I will manage your affairs, your Social Security, any income. This property, if it has any value at all, we'll deal with. This will all be taken care of, Mom. You do not have to do this anymore. He produced a folder from inside his coat. He held it out. He said, you just have to sign Adelaide looked at the folder. She looked at her son. This is the second time in 7 months you have handed me papers and told me to sign. I will not sign anything else for you, ever. She did not take the folder. She said, Roland, yes, get off my property. His face went white, then red. Mom, I will not say it again. You are not in your right mind. You are an old woman living alone in a condemned cabin with raccoons. You are very obviously not in your right mind. I am the most in my right mind I have ever been in my life. Mom, off. You are going to regret this. Perhaps you are going to die out here. Perhaps. And when you do, this whole thing is going to be on me. Cleaning it up, burying you, telling people, do you understand that I will be the one who has to deal with it? She looked at him for a long moment and she said very quietly, Roland, the only thing I am still your mother for is to teach you one more thing. That you do not get to talk to me like this. He stared at her. She stared back. She did not blink. Eventually, he turned. He walked back to his car. He slammed the door. He drove away. His tires kicked up frozen mud onto the porch. She watched him go. She did not move until the sound of his engine faded into the silence of the pines. Then she sat down on the milk crate. She held the thermos of soup against her chest, and she let herself shake. For a long time, the bad night was December 20th. A nor'easter came through Vermont. Adelaide had been listening to Odette's old battery radio for 2 days. The weatherman had used the word historic. He had used the word life-threatening. He had told everyone in the listening area to stay indoors, to not travel, to check on elderly neighbors. Adelaide laughed when she heard that last part. There were no neighbors to check on her. There were only the pines and the raccoons who had finally, grudgingly, moved out 2 weeks ago when she had stuffed their kitchen den with branches and tarp. The temperature began to drop at 3 in the afternoon. By 6, it was -4. By 9, it was -18. The wind came in across Lake Champlain. It hit the forest like a wall. Adelaide had stoked the wood stove all afternoon. She had used her last good dry firewood. She had stuffed every gap in the windows with extra cloth. She had hung the wool blanket Odette had given her over the doorway to the bedroom. She had piled everything she owned on top of herself on the floor in front of the stove. She slept in fits. She woke at 1 in the morning. Something was wrong. The fire was out, not low. Out. The house was already cold, truly cold. She fumbled in the dark for the matches. Her fingers would not work properly. She dropped them, she picked them up, she dropped them again. She tried to light the stove. The wood was damp. It would not catch. She tried again. The match burned down to her fingers. Again. Her hands were shaking too hard. She could not feel her feet. A small voice came up out of her. Oh, this is how it happens. Roland was right. She lay back down on the floor. She closed her eyes. She felt herself getting warmer. She knew from something she had read once that when you feel warm in a cold like this, you are dying. She thought about Edmund. All right. I am coming. There was a banging, a pounding, somewhere very far away. Then the door bursting open, then a man's voice, sharp, loud. Adelaide. She did not answer. Adelaide, look at me. A face above her, white hair, worried eyes. Silas. Adelaide, stay with me. Stay with me, woman. He lifted her. He was old, she was small, but she felt herself lifted, half carried, half dragged, out into the wind, wrapped in a blanket, the world spinning, the truck, the heater on full blast, the smell of pipe tobacco. She drifted, she came back, she drifted again. She heard him on the radio calling someone, Odette, she's hypothermic. I'm bringing her in, get the back room ready, get blankets, get warm water. She tried to speak. She wanted to say, I'm sorry. She could not get her mouth to make the words. She closed her eyes. She woke in a bed, a real bed, with sheets and a heavy quilt and a pillow. The room smelled like cinnamon. She did not know where she was. She tried to sit up. A hand pressed her shoulder back down. Odette, stai, where am I? Back room of the store. You slept 23 hours. Adelaide looked at her. Why am I alive? Odette's mouth twitched. Silas drove out at 1:30 in the morning. Through that storm in a 40-year-old pickup truck, he had a feeling. He said he could not sleep. He drove out to check on you. Silas. Yes. Adelaide closed her eyes. A tear ran down the side of her face into her ear. She let it. She did not have the strength to stop it. She said, I want to go home. Honey, you are not strong enough. Mi stove. Silas is out there. He's rebuilding it. He says the chimney clogged in the wind. He's fixing it. My house. It's fine, Adelaide. My house. Odette sat down on the edge of the bed. She took Adelaide's hand. She said, very gently, Adelaide, you can cry. You're allowed. And Adelaide cried for the second time in front of someone since Edmund had died. She cried about her son. She cried about the cold. She cried about Edmund. She cried about the 45 years of furniture she had left behind in a house that no longer belonged to her. She cried about her own body betraying her in the cold. She cried about being 70 years old and alone in the woods. She cried until she could not breathe. Odette held her hand the entire time, did not say one word, just held it. When Adelaide was done, Odette gave her a clean handkerchief and a cup of tea and a piece of toast with butter. Then she said, eat that, sleep. We'll talk in the morning. She turned off the light. She closed the door. And Adelaide Holloway, in a borrowed bed in the back room of a country store in a Vermont snowstorm, fell asleep, safe. For the first time in months, safe. She went home on Christmas Eve. The roads had been plowed. Silas drove her in his truck. The forestry road had been cleared somehow by him with a borrowed plow. Without telling her, he had also rebuilt her chimney with cleaner draft, with proper flashing, with a small metal cap on top to keep the birds out. He had brought her a cord of dry firewood. He had brought her a real wool sleeping bag, rated for 30 below. This is too much, Silas. Christmas, it is too much. Adelaide, Silas, it is Christmas. Be quiet. She was quiet. She made him soup that night from the things in Odette's bag. He stayed for an hour. He did not say much. He looked at the small fir branch she had stuck in a bottle on the table with a single red ribbon tied around it as decoration. He said, that's a good tree. Thank you. Adelaide, yes, I am glad you are still here. So am I. He left. She sat alone in her warm, quiet, slowly becoming a home house. I almost died 3 nights ago. And the only thing I felt sorry about as I was dying was that I had not finished what I started. That is something to know about yourself. The next morning, Christmas Day, she decided to fix the ceiling. There was a board near the back wall that had been bothering her. It bowed downward, different from the others, as if water had pooled above it. If that goes, I will have a hole in the roof above my bed. She got a chair, she climbed up, she was careful. Rule 1, do not fall. She used the small hammer Silas had given her. She pried at the warped board. It came up easier than she expected because it was not nailed in like the others. It had been laid in, loose, hidden. And behind it, in the gap between the ceiling and the roof, was a space, a small square hollow. And in the space was a box, a wooden crate, about 2 feet square, wrapped in something dark and oily and rotted, heavy enough that when she touched it, she nearly lost her balance on the chair. She steadied herself, slowly, carefully, with trembling arms. She lowered the crate down, she climbed off the chair, she set the crate on the floor, she knelt in front of it. Her hands were shaking, she brushed away the rotted cloth, and there, burned into the wood of the lid, in careful, deliberate letters, she read, Tak, 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 1871. Adelaide Holloway sat back on her heels in her ruined kitchen on Christmas Day in the woods of Vermont. What in God's name did I just find? Adelaide knelt in front of the crate for a long time. She did not open it, not yet. Her hands were not steady enough. Her heart was beating in a way she did not trust. She could feel it in her throat, in her teeth, in the tips of her cold fingers. She made herself stand up. She made herself walk to the wood stove. She put another log in. She watched the flames take. She made a cup of black tea. She drank it slowly. She sat on her milk crate. She looked at the wooden box on the floor of her ruined kitchen. Tagrav Vav. 1871, man's initials. Burned into wood over 150 years ago. Who was TWW, and what did he hide in the ceiling of this house? Her tea grew cold in her hands. She did not drink it. She walked back to the crate. She knelt down again. She put her hands on the lid. She whispered to the empty room, Edmund, I do not know what this is. The fire popped in the stove. She took that as permission. She opened the box. The smell came first. Not rot, not mildew, paper, old leather, old ink, something faintly sweet underneath that, pressed flowers, dried plants. She lifted the rotted oilcloth away in pieces, and there, in the lantern light, lying in careful rows, were books, 6 of them, leather-bound, cracked, brown with age, the kind of books a person makes by hand, one at a time, because there is no machine yet that will do it for them. She lifted the top one, slowly, like it was a sleeping child. She opened the cover. The first page had been written in iron gall ink. The ink had turned a deep rust brown over the years, but the handwriting was still beautifully clear. She read it once, then twice, then a third time, just to be sure she had seen it correctly. Thomas Wendell Whitmore, Field Notes, New England Flora, June 1871, Volume I. Below that, in smaller writing, begun this day on the property I have purchased in the deep northern forest of Vermont, 12 miles outside the town of Burlington. My cottage is finished. The work begins. Adelaide stopped breathing. She closed the book. Slowly, she set it back in the crate. She put her hands flat on the floor on either side of the box to steady herself. This is the same house this man, this Thomas Whitmore, built. This house, she looked around her at the walls she had scrubbed of mold, at the floor she had swept clean, at the wood stove she had brought back from the dead. I am sitting inside another person's life who hid himself from the world in here. Why? She did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor with the lantern. She read carefully, page by page, because the paper was old and the binding was loose. The journal was full of small, careful drawings, a leaf, a flower in cross-section, the way a vine wound around a tree. Every drawing was labeled in Latin. Every page was dated. Every observation was specific. The 14th of June, 1871. The morning damp brings out the orange of the chanterelles on the north slope. They grow in pairs near the base of the white pine, never the red pine. Why? The 22nd of June, 1871. The plant the locals call ghost pipe grows only in shadow. When picked, the stem bleeds a clear fluid that smells of nothing. The Abenaki, I am told, use this plant for pain. I will test this on myself first. The 3rd of July, 1871. The blue cohosh root, prepared correctly, eases the cramping pain in my left leg in less than 10 minutes. I do not know if this is observation or imagination. I will test again next moon. It went on, page after page, for 4 years. She read until the candle in her lantern guttered out. She read by the light of the stove. She read past midnight, past 2, past 3. At some point, she fell asleep on the floor with her cheek on an open page. When she woke, it was dawn, December 26th. And she knew, in the deep, quiet way, you know things in your bones. She had found something. She had found something that did not belong to her. She had found something that belonged to the world. The crate had more in it. She emptied it carefully. Hundreds of pressed botanical specimens, carefully arranged between heavy pages, each one labeled, each one dated, each one with a number that matched a journal entry, drawings, dozens of them, birds, insects, the way moss grew on different sides of trees, a meticulous illustration of a single mushroom with notes on its underside, its color, its taste, its effect when consumed in small quantities, letters in old envelopes, some addressed to T. Whitmore, Esquire. The return addresses were in London, Edinburgh, Boston. One, written in different handwriting, was addressed simply to my friend Thomas. Adelaide did not open the letters, not yet. Some part of her, the librarian part, the part of her that had spent 31 years handling old books in a school library and knowing when something was fragile, that part of her said, stop, you are not the right hands for this. She closed the crate, she covered it again with the cleanest piece of cloth she had, she pushed it carefully to the wall, and then she walked out into the morning and she started walking 5 miles to Marchetti's general store. Silas was already there when she arrived. He was at the counter, drinking coffee, talking to Odette about the storm, about whose driveway needed plowing, about a deer he had seen. He stopped talking when he saw her face. Adelaide, Silas, you look pale. I need to ask you something, all right? She walked up to the counter. She looked at him. She said, you were a science teacher? Yes, at the high school, 36 years. Do you know anyone? At the university? He looked at her. At UVM. Yes. What kind of someone who would know about old plants, about old books, about a naturalist from the 1870s. He set his coffee cup down carefully. He said, Adelaide, yes. What did you find? She looked at Odette. She looked at Silas. She said, I do not know what I found, but I think it is important. Silas stood up. He put on his coat. He said, show me. He came back to the house with her. He carried a thermos of coffee. He carried a clean cloth. He carried a pair of thin cotton gloves he had found somehow in the back of his truck. Verhandling all things. When he saw the crate, when he saw the journals, when he read the words, Thomas Wendell Whitmore, Field Notes, New England Flora, June 1871. He sat down on the floor. He did not say anything for a full minute. Then he stood up. He went outside. Adelaide followed him. He was standing on the porch with his hand over his mouth. She said, Silas. He turned to her. His eyes were wet. He said, Adelaide, yes. Do you know who Thomas Whitmore was? No. He was a British naturalist. He came to America in 1869. He believed there were plants in the New England forests with medicinal properties that nobody had documented. He came here to find them. He built a cottage in the Vermont woods, somewhere outside of Burlington. He worked alone. He vanished in 1874. His body was never found. His work was never recovered. She stared at him. He went on. In the scientific community, in the historical community, Thomas Whitmore is Adelaide. He is a legend. There are libraries that have been looking for his journals for 150 years. He pressed his hand to his mouth again. He said, "You, Adelaide, you found them." She could not speak. He said, "In a $5 house." She said, "It was Christmas Day." He stared at her. She stared back. And then, slowly, Silas Pemberton, old, careful, weathered Silas Pemberton, began to laugh, a small laugh, a surprised laugh, the laugh of a man who has spent his whole life waiting for one thing he could not name and has just seen it appear in front of him. He laughed for a long time. Adelaide did not laugh, but she smiled for the first time in a long time. She smiled. Silas made the call from her porch. She did not know who he was calling. He spoke quietly, carefully, the way you would speak to a wild animal you did not want to spook. "Imogen, it's Silas Pemberton from Burlington High." Pause. "Yes. Years. Listen, I have a friend. She found something in a house she just purchased. I need you to come and look at it." A pause? No. Not the kind of thing I can explain on the phone. "Imogen, I would not call you if it were not real. Please." A pause? "Yes. Tomorrow." He ended the call. He looked at Adelaide. He said, "Dr. Imogen Ashford, UVM, historical botany, the best in the Northeast. She is driving up in the morning." Adelaide sat down on a milk crate. She said, "Silas, I am scared of what this means." He nodded slowly. He said, "Adelaide, yes, whatever this means." He looked at her. "It is good." She breathed out. "All right." Dr. Imogen Ashford arrived on December 28th at 9 in the morning. She was 58, tall, severe looking, wire-rimmed glasses, a long gray coat, the kind of woman who looked like she had spent her entire adult life saying the evidence does not support that conclusion in academic meetings. She climbed out of her Subaru. She looked at the house. She did not laugh. She did not even smile. She just looked at the house carefully for a long minute, as if she were already cataloging it. She walked up to Adelaide. She extended a hand. "Mrs. Holloway, yes, I am going to ask you some questions before I see what you found. Please do not be offended. I have been in academic work for 30 years. I have seen many things. Most of them are not what people think they are." "All right, where did you find the box?" "In the ceiling, behind a loose board." "How loose?" "Slightly bowed, not nailed in like the others." "You opened it yourself?" "Yes." "Have you handled the contents?" "Yes, with my bare hands, the first night, and since Silas told me what they might be, I have not touched anything else." He gave me cotton gloves. Dr. Ashford's mouth twitched, just slightly. It was almost a smile. "All right, show me." Adelaide led her inside. Imogen Ashford stopped in the doorway of the cottage. She looked around. She looked at the patch roof. She looked at the woven branch windows. She looked at the small, clean patch of floor in front of the stove. She said quietly, almost to herself, "It is the right kind of construction." For the period, she walked to the crate. She knelt down beside it. She pulled out a pair of white archival gloves from her bag. She put them on. She opened the box. She lifted the first journal. She turned it in her hands. She held it up to the light from the window. She read the cover. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Adelaide watched her face, watched it for the small tells of a professional who is trying very hard not to show what she is feeling. Imogen turned to the first page. She read the inscription. Her eyes moved slowly down the page. Then she went very still. She did not speak. A small panic rose up in Adelaide's chest. "I should not have called her. I should not have called her. I have wasted her time. This will turn out to be nothing." Imogen closed the journal, very carefully. She set it back in the box. She removed her gloves. She stood up. She turned to face Adelaide. Her eyes were wet, not crying, just wet. She said, "Mrs. Holloway, yes, in my career, yes, I have not, until today, held a thing, quite like this, in my hands." Adelaide could not speak. Emo has said, "This is real. You are sure?" I will need to do verification, carbon dating on the paper, handwriting comparison to known samples in the British Museum. There are protocols that will take 3 months. But she paused. "Mrs. Holloway, I have spent my whole life reading about Thomas Whitmore. I have read every surviving letter, every reference, every contemporary description of him. I know his handwriting the way I know my husband's. This is his. There is no doubt in my mind." She gestured to the box. "You have just become, without exaggeration, one of the most important amateur discoveries in American natural history in the last 50 years. Adelaide sat down on her milk crate. She put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She was past crying. She was somewhere else now. A place where you do not have words. Imogen Ashford watched her. Then she said, gently, "Mrs. Holloway, yes, may I ask, how did you come to be here?" Adelaide lifted her face. She looked at this academic woman, this scientist, this stranger, and she said, "My children took everything I had, so I bought a house for $5. And I came out here to start over." There was a silence. Then Imogen Ashford said, very softly, "Mrs. Holloway, yes, I do not believe in fate. No, but I believe that this house has been waiting for a long time for the right person to come and find what is inside it." Adelaide began to cry then, quietly, without sound. Imogen Ashford handed her a clean white handkerchief from her bag, and she said, "This is going to change your life, Mrs. Holloway. Are you ready for that?" Adelaide wiped her eyes. She said, "I have already started over once at 70. She handed the handkerchief back. She said, "I can do it again." The next 4 months happened fast. The journals went under armed couriered transport to a climate-controlled vault at the University of Vermont. Imogen Ashford herself oversaw the transfer. Adelaide was given an itemized receipt. She kept it in the inside pocket of her cardigan next to Edmund's letter. Carbon dating confirmed the paper. Handwriting analysis confirmed Whitmore. The pressed specimens, when examined by botanists at UVM and Harvard, yielded a discovery so significant that the head of the herbarium called Imogen at 2 a.m. to tell her what they had found. Among the 400 specimens were 17 plants declared extinct in Vermont since the 1920s. The only known preserved samples of 17 species anywhere on Earth, in a wooden box, in the ceiling of a $5 house. The Vermont Historical Society descended on Timber Ridge Road in February. They authenticated the structure. They found Whitmore's initials carved into a beam in the attic, TWW, the same initials as on the box. The state declared the cottage a historical landmark in March. Grant funding came through in April, $340,000 for restoration, period appropriate, solid, real, a new roof, a real one, with proper shingles, wooden ones, the way they did them in 1871, real glass in the windows, hand blown to match the originals. Adelaide kept her woven branch covers, hung them on the inside wall as a reminder, a proper kitchen with a wood stove, and quietly installed behind period cabinets, real plumbing, real electricity, real heat, a small archival room in what had been the bedroom, climate controlled to housed the journals when they returned. Outside, a small parking area, a simple sign, Whitmore Cottage, historic site, Est, 1871. In smaller letters underneath, Adelaide Holloway, caretaker. She was sworn in as caretaker on May 14th, 2024, 6 months, almost to the day, since her children had thrown her out. She wore a navy dress. The only dress she had, Odette had taken it in for her because she had lost so much weight over the winter. Silas was there, Odette was there, Imogen Ashford was there, 6 members of the Vermont Historical Society, 3 reporters, 1 photographer. She received a small wooden plaque and a salary of $2,100 a month. And more importantly, the right to live in the cottage for the rest of her life. After the ceremony, she walked alone, just for a minute, to the back of the property, where she had stood that first morning in the cold, looking at the frost on the pines. She put her hand in her pocket. She felt Edmund's letter. She whispered, "I am using them." She held up her hands, calloused, spotted, strong. She said, "I told you I would." The first photograph ran in the Burlington Free Press on May 15th. The second ran in the Boston Globe on May 17th. The third ran in the New York Times on May 21st. The headline was, at 70, Vermont widow discovers lost naturalist life work in house she bought for $5. The article went viral. By the end of the week, Adelaide had received 47 interview requests. She accepted 3, she declined the rest. She had a job to do. They came on the 27th of May. A Tuesday, Adelaide was outside, putting in the first row of tomato plants in what would become her garden. The earth was still cold, but the days were warm enough now. She heard the car before she saw it. A new black SUV, polished, out of place on the forestry road. She did not stand up. She kept her hands in the dirt. The car parked at the edge of her clearing. The doors opened. Roland got out first, then Vivienne. They walked toward her carefully across the uneven ground, in shoes too nice for the road. Adelaide did not look up, not yet. She finished pressing the soil around the last tomato seedling. Then she stood, slowly. She dusted off her hands. She turned, she looked at her 2 children, and for the first time in 7 months, she was not afraid of them. Mom, Roland spoke first. Yes, we've been trying to find you. She tilted her head. We've been worried. For how long? Mom, for how long, Roland? He looked at the ground. A while. She said it slowly, like she was tasting the lie. Again, she turned to Vivienne. Vivienne would not meet her eyes, but there was something different in her daughter's face, something Adelaide had not seen before. Not anger, not contempt, shame, real shame. Adelaide noted it, she filed it away, she did not act on it, not yet. She said, "Why are you here?" Roland straightened. He shifted into a new voice, a practiced voice, the voice he used in meetings, with clients, with people he wanted to manage. "Mom, we saw the news. The story is everywhere. We can't tell you how relieved we are that you're okay, that this all worked out." It did not work out, Roland. What? It did not work out. I made it work. He blinked. He started again. Right. Of course. We want to make sure that you have the right people helping you going forward. This is going to be a lot, Mom. Reporters, lawyers, tax issues, property issues. You should not have to manage this alone. He paused, he pressed, and we were thinking, with the publicity and the value of all this, it might be smart to consider selling to the state or to a private foundation. There are people who would pay a great deal to take this off your hands, and then you could move closer to family. He paused. There it was. She had known it would come. She had even rehearsed in her head what she might say, but she had not known how she would feel. She had thought she would feel angry. She did not feel angry. She felt sad, just sad, for her son, who would never, as long as he lived, understand what he had just done. She walked past him. She went to the side of the porch. She picked up the small folding table she kept there. She carried it into the clearing. She set it down. She brought out 3 folding chairs. She said, "Sit down, both of you." They sat. She went into the cottage. She brought out the teapot, 3 mismatched cups, a small dish of butter cookies that Odette had given her. She poured the tea slowly for both of them. She did not pour for herself. She sat down. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at her children and she said, "All right, I will speak and you will listen, and then you will go home." On the morning of November 15th, last year, you left me on a sidewalk with $56 and a suitcase tied together with string. Vivienne flinched. Adelaide did not look away from her. You did not call to check on me that night or the next night or any night for 7 months. She turned to Roland. "You came once in December to get me to sign a paper so you could control my Social Security." Roland opened his mouth. She held up one hand. He closed it. "That is what I know about you as my children. In the last 7 months," she paused, "now I will tell you what I know about the people I have met. In those same 7 months," she turned slightly. "There is a man named Silas Pemberton who I met on a sidewalk after the auction. He drove me for free out into the woods. He gave me a wool blanket and a kerosene lamp and $20. The first night, he did not ask for one thing. In return," she paused, "3 weeks later, he drove through the worst storm Vermont has had in a decade to find me before I froze. She let that sit. He saved my life." Roland looked at the table. "There is a woman named Odette Marchetti who I met 2 days after the auction. She gave me a job. She gave me hot soup 3 times a week for 7 months. She is 65 years old, and she runs a country store, and she has known me for half a year, and she has done more for me than my own children have done in the last decade." She paused, and there is a woman named Imogen Ashford who came out here in the snow the week after Christmas to look at a box I had found in the ceiling because Silas Pemberton called her at home and asked her to. She drove 3 hours to listen to an old woman she had never met. She set her hands on the table. She looked at her son. "You did not come." She looked at her daughter. "You did not come." She looked at both of them. They came. The forest was very quiet, a bird somewhere, the wind in the pines. Adelaide took a small breath. Roland, "Mom, this house is not for sale. Mom, listen, it is not for sale to the state, to a foundation, to anyone. I will live in it for the rest of my life. And when I die, it will go to the Vermont Historical Society with the condition that it remain a historic site in perpetuity." He went pale. You are not. "Leaving it to us. No, Mom, You will not receive $1 from this estate. Mom, we are your children. You were, he flinched. She said, you are still, but you have not been for a long time. Vivienne was crying, silently, tears moving down her face onto the collar of her coat. Adelaide watched her carefully. There is a kind of crying that is performance, and there is a kind of crying that is grief. And a mother, even an old mother, even a mother who has been lied to, can still tell the difference. Vivienne's crying was grief. Adelaide softened just slightly. She said, Vivienne. Vivienne looked up. I am not finished with you yet. Vivienne nodded, but the door is not closed. With you. Vivienne nodded again, harder. Adelaide turned to her son. She said, Roland, the door's closed today with you. He stared at her. Mom, you came here with your hands open to take. That is not what I. Yes, it is. He could not answer. Roland, the day you come here with your hands open, not to take, but to set something down. We will talk about opening that door again. Mom, not until then. He stood up. He looked for one moment like a small boy again, the little boy who had broken her favorite vase and been afraid to tell her. She almost reached for him. She did not. He turned, he walked to the SUV. He did not look back. Vivienne stayed. She sat at the table. She looked at her mother. She said, I am so sorry. I know I have been so afraid to call you for months. I know I did not know how. I know, Mom? Yes. May I come back? Adelaide reached across the table. She put her old hand on her daughter's hand. She squeezed it. She said, yes. Vivienne began to weep. Adelaide let her. She did not say it is all right, because it was not all right. It was not yet all right. But it could be one day, if they were both willing to work. She just held her daughter's hand and let the tears come. Time has its own way of moving in the woods. Vivienne came back 4 times that summer, without gifts, without agendas, with a small thermos of her own iced tea, with pictures of her teenage children, who she admitted did not really know their grandmother, with questions about how to plant tomatoes, with apologies that did not ask for forgiveness. Adelaide did not forgive her all at once. She forgave her in pieces, a piece every visit. By August, most of the pieces had been given back. By October, Vivienne brought her 13-year-old daughter. The girl met Adelaide. Shyly at first, then less shyly. By the end of the afternoon, she was helping Adelaide weed the garden and laughing at something her grandmother had said. Adelaide watched her granddaughter pull weeds, and she thought, Edmund, you should have been here. You would have liked this. The little girl looked up, caught her grandmother watching her. She smiled. She had Edmund's smile. Roland did not come back. In the fall, Adelaide received a letter from an attorney in Hartford, brief, formal. Her son had filed for divorce. He had been let go from his firm. The official reason was restructuring. The unofficial reason, Vivienne quietly admitted, was a long-standing problem with money. In November, Adelaide sat down at her small kitchen table. She wrote a letter by hand, in her old, careful schoolteacher's handwriting. Roland, I have heard about the divorce and the job. I am sorry, truly. Not because I think you deserve to suffer, but because I am your mother, and no mother. No matter what has happened, wants her child to suffer. I will not send you money. That is not the door. The door is coming here without hands open to take, just coming. The door is still here, Roland, whenever you are ready. Mom. She mailed the letter. He did not reply. but she had done her part. That was all a mother could do. In March of 2025, 3 months before Adelaide's 72nd birthday, a paper appeared in the journal Nature. The lead author was Dr. Imogen Ashford. The second author, listed by name, was Adelaide Holloway. The paper documented 17 previously presumed extinct plant species preserved by Thomas Wendell Whitmore in 1871. The paper also formally introduced a new species, a small purple aster, never previously described, whose preserved specimen had been found in Whitmore's collection. The species was given a name, Aster Holloway. Imogen had named it. Without telling Adelaide, she had named it after Edmund. When Adelaide read it in the journal, she sat for a long time with the page open in her lap. Then she walked outside to the small patch of garden at the edge of the clearing where she had planted Edmund's hydrangeas, the originals, 2 stems that Vivienne had quietly dug up from the old yard and brought to her in a coffee can on a visit in July. They were small now, but they were growing. Adelaide knelt down beside them slowly. She said, "Edmund." The wind moved in the pines. She said, "They named a flower after you." She put her hand on the soil near the roots. She said, "I am still using them." She held up her hand, old, wrinkled, strong. She said, "Thank you." On November 15th, 2025, 2 years to the day, since her children left her on a sidewalk, Adelaide turned 72. The party was at the cottage. Silas brought a homemade pie, apple, with a lattice top from a recipe he said his wife used to make. He admitted he had practiced it 3 times before he got it right. Odette brought 2 pounds of fresh bread and a tall jar of her tomato sauce, and quietly a wool shawl for the porch nights. Han. Imogen brought a framed copy of the Nature paper. Vivienne came with her daughter, and this time with her teenage son, who shook his grandmother's hand carefully and then suddenly hugged her. Adelaide closed her eyes when he hugged her. She did not let go for a long time. 12 other people came, graduate students, 2 reporters, the director of the Vermont Historical Society, a botanist from Harvard who had flown in specifically for this. There was a cake, there were candles. There was a moment just before she blew them out when Adelaide looked around at the people on her porch, old, young, new friends, old loved ones, people who had appeared in her life in the most unlikely possible ways. Family, not by blood, by choice, by work, by the slow, daily, patient choosing of each other, over and over again. She blew out the candles. Everyone clapped. The sun set behind the pines. Later, after everyone had gone, Silas stayed to help with the dishes. They washed in silence. He dried, she washed. When they were done, they sat on the porch with 2 cups of tea and a small dish of butter cookies. Silas said, "Adelaide, yes, 2 years, 2 years. Are you all right?" She thought about it, honestly. Not the answer people wanted to hear. The real one. She said, "I am better than all right." He nodded. He said, "Yes, you are." A long silence, the kind only old friends can sit in. Then she said, almost to herself, "They thought I would die out here." Yes, they thought $5 was all I was worth. Yes, they were wrong. Yes. She turned her teacup in her old, strong hands. "Silas, yes. The thing I learned is not that I was always worth more. No, the thing I learned is that no one, not my children, not the men in that auction room, not even me, gets to decide what I am worth. He waited. She said, what I am worth is what I build with these hands. Every day, from whatever is left, after they take what they take, a pause, and that is something they cannot ever take from me. The wind moved softly through the pines. Silas Pemberton turned his head slightly. He looked at the woman beside him, the 72-year-old widow in a wool shawl, on the porch of the cottage she had saved, in a forest she had survived, in a life she had built with her own hands. After everyone else had thrown her away, he raised his teacup. He said, to you, Mrs. Holloway. She raised hers. She said, to us, Mr. Pemberton. They clinked, they drank, and above them, in the deepening November sky, a single star, the same single star she had stared at 2 years before, through the gap in a broken roof, on the first night of the worst year of her life, was just beginning to rise